Hey guys, everything new on its own. I was looking at my YouTube dashboard. I noticed a particular playlist seemed to show high on that one, and it was my Drobo updates. Let me see if I can find that again. It seemed to show a certain amount of people watching that, so I thought I'd do an update video. And this is basically has been about 6 months since I purchased my Drobo 5N. Now, prior to this, I had the 4-bay Drobo, so I thought I would do a bit of a follow up and see, give you guys an update as to where I was. I had made changes to the hard drives. Probably the last video that I did related to it was about basically I had a bunch of drive failures and I was sticking in some more drives. Let me see, playlists. I'm looking on my iPad here. See, this pulls it up. I was seeing about. Alright, well, it's not showing it now. It was showing me a certain amount of percentage audience that was watching it. Regardless, neither here nor there. Oh, top playlist playing your content. There it is. 8.3% Drobo / data archiving and backups. That was it. So I thought I'd do a quick little update here. So I had a 4-bay Drobo. It had single disk redundancy. It was okay. It was working well. I had no particular issues. I had upgraded the fan on it to an ultra silent fan. However, I decided that I wanted dual disk redundancy and also the server options on the 5N. So you can run WordPress on the 5N. You can access it remotely. It's network attached. That was a big thing that I wanted, whereas the 4-bay I was using the Firewire version of it. So I went ahead and got this off eBay. It was broken not for parts, and you can see how much I paid for 122 Canadian. It was probably another $40 to ship it, but it's turned out really well for me. So I'm going to bring up the interface here, and I'll show you. Oh, started up on the wrong screen. That's okay. I'll slide it over in a second here. Here is the Drobo itself. So this is a 5N. So I went with the 5N because it was network attached. Now, when I initially got the 5N, the performance was lousy for iPhoto. What I did, though, was I upgraded to a gigabit Ethernet. I got a dedicated gig Ether switch to run it on. And I also upgraded to the SSD. So here's the 5N. And in this case, you can see the SSD on the bottom there. The MSET accelerator bay is located underneath your Drobo. Again, this was a broken 4 parts unit. What I had to do was buy a new power supply. And the power supply itself is 50 or 80 bucks, I think, by the time you get shipping, etc. Now, this particular unit, after I added the SSD and made sure I had a good solid set of drives, the performance is actually very good. I was very disappointed initially with iPhoto's performance loading off it, but now it's very usable. It's not as snappy as direct attached storage, but it's very snappy. And I think the large part of that was upgrading my network to true gigabit Ethernet as opposed to like a 10100 Ethernet is just not fast enough. It just does not. It doesn't make photos usable in terms of the load up and then editing and shifting between photos. It's usable now. It would not be. It would probably not be usable for the professional, but for the home user, it's good. So the last change that I did on this Drobo was to insert the 3 terabyte drive. I believe this is my latest. This was my Iron Wolf. Does it show Iron Wolf? I think I had, because I had to send 2 in. I had an Iron Wolf NAS hard drive, and it failed. It was basically being rejected by the Drobo 5N, and I was thinking, oh no, the Drobo does not like networked NAS drives, dedicated NAS drives for some reason. Maybe they're slower. They are slower. And so maybe it's responding more slowly than the rest of the drives, which are regular desktop 7200 RPM drives. And so maybe that was causing the Drobo to think that there was something wrong with the NAS drive. But I have a single Iron Wolf, I believe, right now in the unit. And this doesn't, unfortunately, show what kind it is. But anyways, I'm pretty sure it's the 3 terabyte there. But that is in there, and I replaced a 500 gig drive. I could have left the 500 gig in. It didn't fail, but I was down to 23%, and basically I got itchy to replace a hard drive, and I had two backup drives. I was in a panic there for a while, switching between the 4-bay and the 5N. I had to have a certain amount of drives, so I needed some extra drives, and then they started failing on me. So it turned out after everything was said and done, and I had actually sent two in for RMA for replacement, that I ended up with two drives. So one network attached storage drive, the Iron Wolf, and another, let me grab it here, another plain old, oh, this is the file. This is the, that's 500 gig. I kept the 500 gig because it still works fine. So if absolutely everything fails, then I can stick another 500 gig in there. Say if one of the 1 terabytes fails, there's enough space in general. I do have a good capacity, and I'm running 2 disk redundancy on this particular unit. So I'm pretty solid from a point of uptime. I also want to talk about how this went through a power outage I had recently and the battery backup, but I'll get to that in a second. But I do have a 1 terabyte Seagate Barracuda standard desktop drive, 7200 RPM. And actually, if you read Drobo's, I believe it's their website, I think it's their website, that they even recommend just getting standard 7200 RPM drives because the performance will be better overall, even over the network attached storage drives, because the network attached storage drives are 5900 RPM or some other RPM slower than the 7200 RPM, and that's for reliability. They last longer if they spin slower, unless you get the high-end server, WD Red Pros or whatever, or the Iron Wolf Pros, whatever they're called. They spin at the faster speed, but kind of your consumer brand are slower than 7200 RPM. So what you end up getting is you have these nice fancy NAS drives, but the end result is that there's slower access because they are spinning slower. So it's actually, for performance, if you're doing video editing, photo editing, it's actually better to have all kind of desktop drives. And because you have dual disk redundancy, you don't have to worry about those desktop drives not lasting as long, because if one fails, you just pop a new one in it, and they're fairly cheap these days, especially for the 1 terabytes. I mean, I'm running a total, let's see, available for data 3.6 terabytes of space, and that's more than 50% of what I need, as we can see in the pie chart here. I'm only using about 50%, but that's good because you want lots of space for the system to move around files as it needs to. And I was down to 23%, and I had the Iron Wolf sitting there, so I thought I'd give it a shot and see if the 5N rejected it. So far, it's been probably a month or two since I did that. I didn't do a video with that, but it's worked out very well. So what I want to talk about now is the power outage. So we had power outages, and normally with power outages are obviously bad for any electronic device. I do have mine on a UPS, though after a certain amount of time, the UPS just shuts off itself, and so it shuts off everything. When the battery goes dead, if you don't shut it off, it's kind of like a server room, in a business. When the power goes out, you run into the office to shut down those servers, because otherwise they're going to go down hard when the UPS fails, runs out of battery. So normally with the Drobo, I would come in and basically you just the power button is a rocker on the back of the unit, and you just click that and it kind of rockers back. But that tells the system that it needs to shut down. That's kind of a soft shutdown mechanism for it. So you kind of click that, and it goes into shutdown mode, and it shuts down in about 60 seconds, whatever it is. And then you leave it off until the power comes on solid again. I did that a number of times, but this unit also has a battery backup. It has a lithium-ion cell in it, so that when the power does go out, it's enough to power the drives for 15 seconds, and it moves everything out of the cache of the Drobo 5N. And moves it onto the SSD, so that when the power does go out, that data is saved, and then when the power comes back, it will then continue writing that to the drives, basically so you don't get data lost in cache or lost in transfer when the power goes out, and then the cache gets erased. So that particular piece worked out well. Now, mine was broken, used, what is it, 4 parts unit. And so I'm not sure how exactly old this is, but that seemed to work fine. I didn't have any issues, no bugs, no errors, no data rebuilding. This has been up for 6 months, and I've really not had any issues outside of the original rejection of a bunch of the drives. And I don't know what was going on. It kept rejecting some of the drives I was putting in there, so I was buying new drives. But it seems to like the network attached storage drive now. It's not having issues with that. If you go, so I've got a 2 terabyte in bay 1, I got a 3 terabyte, 1 terabyte. See, I have a complete mix, and I had the 500 gig in here as well, and it was working just fine. And then of course the SSD. In terms of the SSD, you can see the battery life 100% there. I guess that reads the bad sectors on the SSD, because after a while the sectors get unwritable, so the system can't do anything with the SSD anymore. But this SSD is, like I say, it's probably less than 4 months old at this point, so it's fine. I didn't find that the SSD accelerated much for photos. In fact, my experience was the opposite, and I've heard people say it as well, that it almost seemed to slow it down, because I think it has to, when it tries to use the SSD, it tries to preload what you're going to view, but photos is kind of, you're pulling hundreds of photos at a time off the Drobo, and they're always changing if you're spinning through them. So it's doing 2 operations instead of 1. Instead of loading directly from the spindle, from the hard drives, to your computer, what it does is spins from the hard drives, it puts it on the SSD, and then it serves that content from the SSD. So it's almost doing 2 steps where it's supposed to be speeding things up. So maybe for different sorts of traffic and data access, it's faster, but I actually found, if anything, it might have been slower. I left it in there. I haven't really had any particular issue with it. It might be marginally quicker if I take it out for my use case, which is basically photos. I also use it for data backup. I clone basically via Time Machine, all the data off my MacBook. So I've got a second copy on the Drobo, and then of course the Drobo has 2 disk redundancy. So I've got, it's fairly safe. Now, of course, you need 3 copies of all your data. That's what they always say. And in theory, I do have 3 copies across all the drives because I have 2 disk redundancy. I could lose 2 of them basically in the Drobo. Of course, if the Drobo dies, then I would need another Drobo to read any of the data that was left on the other drives. But that being said, I do have a tertiary backup drive, USB backup drive, that I back up to occasionally, once every couple months basically, just to get the main historical data backed up. Suffice it to say, that's what I use it for, backing up, which you don't care about how fast things are. That thing just goes in the background, and I use a carbon copy cloner for that. And then photos. Photos is the only thing that I actually kind of run live off the Drobo itself, that I spin off it itself, and that seems to work well. I'd show you, but there's personal photos on there that I don't particularly want to share. Like I say, suffice it to say, it is quite usable, and so I'm very happy with it. And like I say, I think the biggest change wasn't the SSD. I think if you load it up with 1700 RPM drives, or even faster, you put the pros or the 10k RPM drives in there, that would be your max performance, I believe. Well, I take that back. Your max performance would be a full set of SSDs, but that would be cost prohibitive, certainly for me. Where it's just a NAS backup device for me, who's doing my own thing, a personal consumer. I don't have the money to spend on 2 terabyte SSDs. Do they even exist? I think 1 terabyte SSDs exist for sure. I guess 2 terabyte and larger do exist, but I mean they're exorbitantly expensive, and it's not by no means cost effective. Doesn't make any sense. And the drives work fine. Like I say, the biggest change for me was putting a proper gigabit Ethernet switch, a dedicated Ethernet switch. And so I have a TP-Link gig Ether switch, and that seems to do it all. I have a gigabit Ethernet switch inside my Belkin access point / router. That, however, because it's probably software based, the switching logic in it, so the performance was not good through that. And like I say, when I got the dedicated switch, that made all the difference for me. So I tell you about the uptime, but I since the power outages and various other things, it's only showing up for 5 days at this point. I think my longest was maybe 22, 25 days. There's power outages, or I've replaced a hard drive, or something else. But I've never had to reboot it because it was locked up, or had other issues with the interface. I've never had to do that. Um, I don't believe so. The only reason I restarted it is because of the power outages, or like I say, replacing that, putting that Iron Wolf hard drive in there, which thankfully has not been rejected yet. So you can see the hot data cache is on, and it is going through Ethernet. I wish this had apparently. I guess the direct attached storage ones give you a few more statistics on throughput, max throughput, etc. This one doesn't. You can at least see the port speed is gigabit Ethernet, and it's full duplex, so that's good. So I don't know. I guess that's just a little update on the Drobo, where we're at. I did replace a drive. I did not do a video about that because it would just be another video of plugging in another drive. I mean, the updating of these things is stupidly easy. I love it. It's very much akin to an Apple product where it's literally plug and play, and you just click some settings, and I've not had an issue since with this. I found with the Drobos you have issues maybe initially with configuration or other issues. Once things settle down, it's pretty much set and forget. They just go on their own, and then every couple months you got to go in there with a compressed can of air or something like that just to clean them out. So that's something I'll be doing shortly. I've just got a couple of shares on here. You can see the public share. This is where I kind of house. This is where I house all my videos. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's about 200 gigs worth of data in there. If I go to get info, this will give you. I don't even know if this will. Oh yeah, okay. There it goes. 600 gigs. So that actually loaded up pretty quick. So it's showing 600 gigs worth of videos. I didn't think I had that much. So that's pretty much all my videos for my YouTube channel. Only starting as of probably 2 years ago when I got the 4-bay Drobo. And this is really backup. This is just in case YouTube goes down, YouTube deletes my channel, whatever. At least I'll have a backup of pretty much most of my videos, most of my last two year sorts of videos. So if I ever had to upload to another service, I could do that. Although the searching of these files would be hard. I mean, I'd have to look through them and figure out what was what. Because a lot of them are unnamed. Like a lot of my prophecy videos just have the date stamp on them, so I can't really tell exactly what they are. That's fine. They're there if I need them. And I have lots of space, so it's not like I need to purge some data. But most of these are outdated and kind of useless. But these are only like 100 megs each, these smaller dated videos, so they don't take up much space. What takes up more space is kind of my Airstream videos, my product reviews, and etc. Those are like 1 gigabyte, 2 gigabytes, etc. And so those are the ones that take up the most space overall. So yeah, just a little update on the Drobo. It's working awesome. I really like it. What more can I say? I haven't had to do anything major to it. It just works. As long as you keep these things clean, they'll go forever pretty much. Because, I mean, what's going to go bad with the electronics? Pretty much nothing. As long as they're, A, not overheated, B, don't get a surge of electricity, or brownouts for that matter, so keep them on a good PS. And C, as long as they don't have all kinds of dust built up in them, which could, short circuits or do something else there. I don't know what else would take them out. So as long as you do the basic steps of protecting electronics and keeping stuff fairly clean, really this should go forever until a new model comes out that has a feature you can't resist. So, little update there, guys. If you're interested for the Drobo stuff, I'll leave there, guys. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe if you haven't yet. We'll see you guys in the next video.